2, 1, and we are live. Welcome to the live stream show. And today we are talking about why you might be thinking about starting a podcast this year in 2022. And so, it seems to be, if you've got any vision of what's going on in today's world, podcasting is having a bit of a golden age. More and more people are joining in and creating their own podcast series, and the barrier to entry is very, very low. And in fact, compared to 4 or 5 years ago, if you go out onto the street and ask any single person, what is a podcast? Most of them will say, oh, I know, and they'll tell you what their favorite show is. So things are moving in a really interesting, good direction. And so I've brought on a special guest today who is one of the champions. In fact, one of the podcasting rebels. His name is Mark Asquith, and he is the founder and CEO of something called Captivate.fm, which is a podcast hosting platform extraordinaire. It's got all these sort of boundary pushing features, and we're going to take a deep dive on what all of that is. So this is the thing, all things podcast today, and why you should be thinking about doing a podcast if you're not doing one already. So stay tuned, don't touch that dial, and let's start the show. Recorded live in Boston, Massachusetts, this is the Livestream Show. In a world full of underexposed entrepreneurs, the Livestream Show is your gateway to a global community of live stream pioneers who dare to go live and create something special and unexpected, which could only happen because it was live. I'm your host, Brad Powell. Let's get on with the show. All right. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you very much, Brad. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about just your background in, most people like myself, when I was a little kid, I was given a radio, and this is one of those old wooden radios, and it had two knobs. It had the, on-off volume knob, and it had the channel knob. And this is one that actually lit up. You could see the little red bar, and you could turn the knob and it would scan all the different stations. And I would literally lay down on the floor next to this thing and listen to radio stories, for hours. It just captured, things like really old shows like The Lone Ranger, and I think it was The Invisible Man. These were really old classic radio shows, and it completely captured my attention. And it's part of why I'm a big longtime podcast listener and now producer to this day. So tell me a little bit about, what happened with you to become sort of such a diehard podcaster.
Well, yeah, I suppose it's, it's probably rooted in a bit of pop culture and so on. I just really enjoy what I enjoy. So whether it's music or whether it's like Star Wars or DC comics or whatever. And I just really started listening to podcasts about that sort of thing, and just enjoyed listening to them. And I was at a time where I was running a design and digital agency around that time. So I thought, I'll create a business podcast around basically what people are asking me, and then spotted some gaps in podcasting the industry and started to build tools around it because we had a digital skill set, so we were able to build them. So that's sort of a very, in a nutshell, sort of story of how I got into it. And that was 11 years ago now. Back in 2011 is probably when I started getting into it properly. And since then it's what I've done, and I'm not, yes, I am a podcaster. I've got various shows, but, I'm not, that's not where I make my living in podcasting. I make my living from the podcasting industry as a creator of tools and software. And, whilst I have created thousands of podcast episodes, that's not what I sell, if you like. I'm not a podcaster that creates podcasts to make money from the shows. I do it for other reasons. So yeah, I'm an interesting one in the space, I guess, because I've been in it for a while now and seen a lot of things, and suppose I forget how long I have been in it, really, Brad, to be honest.
Right. All right. So you mentioned you spotted some gaps in the podcast space. And so like, what were the things that you were seeing when you started, and what are the gaps and the opportunities that you're seeing even to this very day?
Well, it was more gaps in the podcast software space and the technology space, the innovations. There was no real way to make WordPress easy for podcasters. So we did that with podcast websites. And then I got into the hosting space with Captivate because at that point, most of the other hosts were boring. And I'm saying that from a place of friendship. I'm friends with all of them. I'm close with Buzzsprout, Libsyn, Blueberry, anyone that you can think of, because we've been in the space for such a long time, and all the hosts are pretty close as friends. But they weren't really doing anything. They weren't doing anything innovative, and we just thought we might be able to. So they're the gaps that I spotted, not necessarily in the creator space, which I do see a lot of gaps in that space, or I have seen a lot of gaps in that space previously. But it was more the technological side of things, Brad. It was more, what do creators really want? Why should it just have to be this way for creators? Because that's how it's always been. Surely we can do something a little different, and that's where we entered the space, and we did a lot to innovate for people, I think, and still do, to this day. Just last week we launched something that no one else has ever done in podcast hosting with Captivate. So we're always doing that. That's what we do. We think like creators because we are creators. And just keep doing it, really.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to be specific. Like, give me like the thing that you just launched that is the thing that no one has ever done before. What is that? What are you talking about?
Oh, I'll give you 10 things.
Okay.
We'll give you loads of things. So last week with Captivate, we released an episode, planning tool and research tool. So, I'm searching the web for research for my guests. And I can just send a link off to Captivate. Captivate will send it through into my Captivate hosting dashboard. I can write some ideas around it, and when I go and record my episode, I've got a printable cheat sheet for recording and a little crib sheet that I can send to my guests. As soon as I create my episode on Captivate will take all those links and those planning notes and turn them into show notes for me, so I don't have to do any work. We've got the dynamic show notes builder, which will take all of the guests from your Captivate account, because we've got an integrated guest booking interview management system. So if you've got all my social info, all my bio, my picture, all that stuff, Brad, that's booked through Captivate, because that's the link you sent me to book on, Captivate will insert all of my information into your show notes. Last week I created 4,000 word show notes that I hadn't typed because Captivate did it with me from all my guest info and stuff. There's loads of things like that. Our dynamic content engine. Other hosting companies might do pre-roll and post-roll. We don't. We do pre-roll, post-roll. We do in-content. We allow you to paint over existing content and then allow you to insert dynamic audio over and above that. We automatically insert text into your show notes based on the audio that you've inserted. Our attribution links, measurable attribution links, how well your call to action's performing. Your single promo link, how many people click through to Apple Podcasts or Spotify when you tell them to. There's 1,000 things that we do that quite literally no one else does. Or they didn't do until they started doing them because we did them. So we get a lot of that. We get a lot of that. And we don't like to half-bake stuff. A lot of people do, like, for example, dynamic content. A lot of people will do like the basic version just to say that they do it and put it on a feature list. So you'll get a lot of hosting companies that do like free plans and so on that'll say, we do dynamic content, but it's only pre and post roll, like before and after the content. That's the easy bit. Anyone can do that. We actually do it properly, where we'll say, well, here's your mid-roll. You can insert content. You can dynamically overwrite content, and you can set it as default. You can do it. You can bulk manage it. You can set defaults moving forward, and there's just loads of things like that, Brad, that I think we've forced other people to keep up with. We've definitely frustrated a lot of people the last few years, I think.
Well, that's great. I really love the idea of being able to insert content and like in the middle of a pre-existing recording that you've done. That's a fantastic new achievement. And one of the things from what you're saying that I just want to underline is that probably the biggest lesson that I have seen from the world of podcasting as it applies to content marketing. I mean, every single entrepreneur worth their salt trying to do anything online is participating in some form of content marketing. And podcasting is one of those mediums which allows you to do that. And however, the thing that podcasting is doing, like the really successful podcasters, what they've done is they've turned their content into a show. And there's a whole art to doing that. And like you're working at it from the technology standpoint, but you are enabling these show creators, these people who are actually creating a show experience for their audience that is far superior than any other, sort of plain vanilla piece of content that's out there. And so these things that you're talking about in terms of being able to, do stuff at the start of your show and have, show notes and doing research on your guest and being able to share that with your guest and then turning that into show notes afterwards and so forth. This is so helpful to create consistency and continuity in the creation of what is actually a show, an ongoing show that has a premise and a theme. And, it's all about the difference between trying to reach as many people as possible and actually getting a group of people to come and stay and come consistently to your episodes, week after week. So
yeah,
how do you think about like show creation just as a general topic?
Well, I think most entrepreneur podcasts are terrible. They are awful. And it's because they've taught that they can just automate everything and they can, let's put your podcast on autopilot, buy this course for $97 or buy this membership, lifetime guarantee, closes tomorrow. The old scarcity NLP crap, is used to sell podcasting courses to people who want to do content marketing. And it's a shame because that is what creates terrible content. And the challenge, I think, is if you are an entrepreneur or if you are a business person and you want to create content, you're right, it has to be a show. But what does that mean? What does it actually mean to have a show? And I don't even think it's enough to just have a premise. You or a theme. Like everyone does that. Like, what's my premise? I teach people how to be better selves, or the usual financial freedom rubbish. It's boring stuff. That's not a show. What's a show is you were brought up on radio. What happens at the top of the hour on radio, Brad? News, traffic, weather, predictability. We all respond to design. To the design of things. And a lot of the older podcasts that did all right, 10, 12, 15 years ago in the business space, only did all right in the business space because no one else was doing it. So now everyone's doing it and you've got to stand out. So when it comes to show design, when it comes to the premise, it's not enough just to create a USP because frankly, it's very rare that there is a USP. People say, well, what's your USP? Oh, I add value to my listeners. Well, that's not a USP. That's sort of a given. Like that's your job. That's the only thing that you should do. Whether you entertain or whether you educate or a bit of both. Whatever. Like the adding value bit is boring. If you're not doing that, you shouldn't be recording. So what's the actual USP? How do you get people involved? What segments have you got? What areas have you got that can be utilized later? What do you do differently for your guests? Heck, do you do a solo show? There's no point interviewing people if you're trying to position yourself as the expert. That's crazy. So there's a lot that goes wrong with entrepreneur podcasts and business podcasts because they are taught to do the minimum work just to put something out. And the way to succeed in podcasting is not to be consistent, it's to be consistently excellent. I'd rather you didn't do it if you weren't going to be good. Don't be consistently average. What's the point? It's a waste of your time. Put that effort into doubling your effort somewhere else and be great at that thing. So there's a lot of challenge that goes on with entrepreneur podcasts because 99% of them are rubbish. But they don't need to be. They only need subtle tweaks to stop being bad. And I'm talking things like, how do you draw out of me what no one else has ever drawn out of me? You've got to design that. You've got to design that in. You've got to think about some of the real penetrating questions that no one else is asking, or create a forum that people can use to talk about things that they don't necessarily always talk about, but that are so related to what what their specific niche is or their specific subject matter expertise is. So yeah, I mean, I talk about this all day, man. It's something that I feel is a real problem for podcasters in the business space, because they've been told, just create a podcast. It's a golden age. No, it's not a golden age. It is not a golden age. It's just bigger than it was last year, right? Where it's the golden age of traffic. It's the golden age of YouTube. It's the golden age of cell phones. You know, it's not. It's just there are more of them, and we've developed more than last year. So it's not right to get people involved just because, you know, it feels on trend, because everything's on trend. Do I start a TikTok? Do I do Instagram Reels? What do I do? So there's a lot to unpack there, I realize, but I'm pretty passionate about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, in the words of Clay Shirky, here comes everybody. You know, when everybody is present in whatever, you know, medium you're looking at, the challenge is how do you stand out amongst all those people? And yeah, there is a big problem of a lot of very mediocre and kind of boring business podcasts, and I'm doing my best to not be one of them myself. So, but the thing that I see, and one of the avenues, and you mentioned it already, this thing about being penetrating in your conversation, you know, comparing podcast as a medium to, say, news journalism. You know, a news journalist's approach, or even a newspaper writer, reporter, their approach to sharing information is, you know, they have a list of questions and they go down the list, and it's sort of this who, what, where, why, and it's all these bullet points, and there's nothing very deep about it. It's all relatively shallow. And in fact, the way news media has evolved in the last decade or so is become shallower and shallower, it seems. And they all seem to cover the same story. They only cover it for 5 minutes and then they move on to something else. Whereas a podcast host, whether they're doing a solo presentation or whether they're doing an interview, has the opportunity to go super deep on whatever it is that they're talking about and ask penetrating questions and ask things. So it's not just a drive-by, you know, shooting kind of interview. It's something where let's take a deep dive and really explore something and ask questions, just like you said, that no one has ever even asked before. And this is the thing that I see is an opportunity and both a challenge for any podcast host who's thinking about this, is that I go, well, what are the questions that you want to bring and ask that other people aren't asking? Like, what are those questions for you? So in this case, you know, when I'm wondering for yourself in terms of you're looking at this from this, you know, you run a software podcast hosting platform and you are wanting to serve a community of podcasters who are on this kind of thing. Like, let's produce the best kind of show experience that we can. So what are the ways that you and your team are thinking about that in terms of like, how do you interact with your community so that you're knowing that you're serving them in the best way possible?
I'm going to rephrase that as a penetrating question.
Okay.
What are other people doing wrong when it comes to helping podcasters to grow? And that, you see the subtle difference with that. Like we'll if we load that question up and it got, you know, give me a chance to spin off my top a little bit. I think what's telling is that a lot of people don't necessarily want to produce good content, and a lot of people, because they just want to produce some content to get it out there. And I think a lot of people enable that by saying, look, you can post this as quickly as you want. You can automate this, you can automate that. And a lot of people automate the wrong things. Like automating various elements of social publishing is pointless. And does Captivate do it? Yeah, to a degree, but we don't take it too far that we take all the work from you, because it becomes something that you just do, and then you wonder why it doesn't grow. Why does my audience not grow? Because they can see that you're just using your Twitter list, for example, or your Twitter following as a way to broadcast things and not to interact. So I think a lot of people genuinely don't care about that, whether it's from a technological standpoint or from me as a creator standpoint. They actually don't want to be told that they've got to create better content. They just want to be told, be consistent, pat on the back, off you go, well done, you've got your episode out this week. And nothing grows like that. Nothing grows like that. That's why businesses can't thrive like that. You know, I can't build a business that is a house developer if all I want to do is do the same thing on every development that I do, the same set of houses, no innovation, no thoughtfulness about the lie of the land, no consideration for the area that it's in. I just couldn't do it. It would fail because people would see, they wouldn't use it. So I think a lot of people enable that in podcasting, whether it's people teaching podcasting or whether it's people that are like building software for podcasters. They work in such a small silo because they've created business models that require people to just continually keep publishing. And it doesn't matter whether they succeed as publishers or not. They just have to keep publishing. So, you know, with Captivate, we don't have to do that. We do not have a free plan. We aren't giving you an Amazon voucher. We're not doing a freemium. We're not doing any of that because it's based on the fact that we don't want you to just keep publishing. We want you to actually grow your audience. So we don't enable things that aren't going to help. You know, will we do a free plan in the future? Maybe. Will we do a cheap plan? Maybe. Will we not? Maybe not. Will we do a more expensive plan? Maybe. And the point is that I'm trying to get to is that you've got to nail down what you're trying to achieve and who you're trying to achieve it for before you do anything. So a lot of people just they're not equipped to want to do better content because that's honestly not what they want to hear. This is why all the gurus are saying, put your podcast on autopilot, create a quality podcast in 1 hour a week. Like, you aren't going to. You aren't. And it's not going to work if you do. You will create something, but it ain't going to grow because it can't. Your business wouldn't grow on an hour a week. So why would your content? So I know that's a really bizarre sort of answer, but I think it's really important to see that it's the golden age of podcasting if you are willing to be one of the people that pushes the boundaries, you know? And it's no one, in my mind, is really enabling that. I think there's more we could do as Captivate. I think there's more that we all could do as the industry to enable creators to be better. You know, things around discoverability, things around how podcasts are surfaced to listeners, things around siphoning out better quality content, a little bit like Netflix does. You know, Netflix knows what is good quality content. So does YouTube. That's why YouTube rarely surfaces automated. You know, if I publish from my podcast to YouTube and I put one of those little graphics over it, that ain't getting found in the results. You know, if I create a fully separate video that has got nice jump cuts, it's got a nice set of, videography setup, decent lighting, it's well structured, it's built for YouTube, and it's got the same everything else, title, tags, description, everything released on the same day at the same time, that one is going to do better than the repurposed auto-published one. Because the industry is now not about volume. There's enough of that. It's now about surfacing the quality, which is why Wondrian, Aaron Mankian, which is why people like Q Code and Macmillan podcasts do really well, because they'll put one season out per year instead of once a week. Now, that's not to say you can't do once a week and it'd be great, you can, but it has to be a pretty full-time job to do it. So again, I know that's a very roundabout answer, but I think this is really important stuff for podcasters. It's not just plug in microphone and, get on with it, sadly. It'd be great if it was.
Yeah, so you just mentioned some top podcasts there. Can you drill in a little bit and be a little more specific of the kind of innovations that you're seeing that they're doing and that they're doing, even that also takes advantage of some of the features that Captivate provides for them?
Well, I think what they're doing really well is just, it's not innovative. It's just innovative in podcasting in that they're thinking about this as an entertainment medium. Wondering, Q Code in particular, Macmillan with things like Driving the Green Book, they are thinking through the listening experience. They are putting quality sound design into things. They are creating experiences, audio experiences, not just, let's put out a podcast because someone told us that we'd be able to explode our influence and 10x our bloody network or any of that stuff. they're thinking about the medium. Now, if you transpose that into the business world, like, who is doing great content in the business world? Who can we name that's doing great content? Well, you've got people like Jordan Harbinger. You know, the research and the work that Jordan puts into one interview is weeks. It's a lot of content, and the work that he puts into marketing his podcast, and that's his job, is to market the podcast. So it's all relative. It's not necessarily innovation. It's just that we haven't seen it a lot in podcasting because everyone has been told that you can just plug in and play. Well, of course you can. You know, I can just buy some bricks and buy some concrete, and I'm sure I'd be all right with a house. But it wouldn't be a great house, would it? So I don't think it's about necessarily the innovation. I think it's more about them innovating in such a way that we perhaps haven't seen in podcasting because no one's been willing to put that work in. It's why we've seen a slew of production companies pop up over the last 3 to 5 years. You know, people like Q-Code and Wondery that then got bought by Amazon. You've got Pineapple, you've got Parcast, there's so many of them. You know, Startup, the Gimlet crew at Startup. The work that went into Startup is off the charts, and they ended up getting bought by Spotify. So it's not innovation. It's just the hard work that a lot of people don't put in. Now, can you do that as an independent podcaster? Yeah, of course you can. You can make some subtle tweaks. You know, you can start to think about what the first 10 seconds of your podcast sound like versus what everyone else's sound like. You can design segments around it. You can consider where you put your calls to action. You can spread them out a little bit more. It doesn't have to all be at the end. You know, you can consider shortening your podcast and making it better content rather than an hour and it just being an hour because you said you'd do an hour. So there's lots of things that we can do to make our shows better that propel us from being, you know, a fairly obscure podcast to like the top 5% in our niche. That's not that difficult. It's just we've got to take the time to do it.
Yeah, it's a matter of a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of and actually, you know, getting other people to help you, whether they're actually hired on your team or not. Some of the best shows that I listen to, I'm really, really impressed at the amount of effort that they take and the amount of care that they take in terms of all the different elements that they add in. And, you know, there's this pretty long, healthy list of these folks. And just like what you're saying, you know, they're in a unique position because of the fact that they've done all this extra work and all this extra effort, and they're leaving the great far majority of folks, you know, way behind simply because they're doing something that actually is interesting and it captures people's attention and it gets them into a mindset of like, oh, this is actually worth my time to listen to, you know. And if that's really what I see as one of the biggest tricks in all of this, is that if people believe that it's worth it, you know, to spend their time, because time is probably the most valuable commodity that you can be exchanging here, then, you know, yes, they'll come and maybe they'll even share it with somebody and bring their friend, but that's going to be, you know, way different than whatever thing that you're doing that is sort of, hey, come listen to my show, or let me post it on Twitter and here's my latest episode, and all of that stuff, I'm not sure goes very far. So one question that I'm interested in hearing your take on, because you probably see other people doing this who are hosted on Captivate, there has been a lot of, this is something I'm very interested in, is combining the medium of podcasting with the medium of video. And there's a lot of people, including myself, who are using video as a way to produce their podcast. So it's produced on video, and, you know, most famous example is people like Joe Rogan and Tim Ferriss have both been using video for some time. And yet there's a whole bunch of other people who are going, no, you know, it doesn't work. It's too much trouble. There's all this extra stuff, you know. What do you think about how video and podcasting work together as a combination?
I think if you can do video well, then do it. But if you can't do it well, at least do it in a way that isn't just putting an image over some audio, because that ain't going to work. You know, it's not going to grow your audience. It's, you know, you and I doing this is better than not doing video. But if we if we didn't have the ability to have cameras and do this remotely, I would much prefer not to do video than just say, well, actually, let's just put one of those, like I said, a moving subs, whatever, moving equalizer or whatever over the top of the audio, because you got to work, you got to work to the platform's strengths. YouTube isn't going to surface your content. It's not going to show people your content in search results, because why would it? You've not produced a video, you've produced audio. So I think if you can do it, you've got to have a genuine video element to it, and then I think the power's in the editing. I think unless you are someone that's got a great audience like Tim Ferriss and a Rogan, you have got to consider the editing. You can't edit the same for audio as you do for video, because people are engaging in different ways with it. YouTube's keeping people's attention on YouTube is very different to keeping people's attention in an audio only medium. So I'd just say think about that. I mean, that's a pretty big topic, but that would be my sort of top level answer, I guess.
Yeah, it's a similar answer in terms of definitely there's a lot of magic that can happen in the editing process. And so, for instance, with this show, I often am adding other clips that are referenced either by myself or my guest. I had Jay Akunzo on a few weeks ago, and he was referencing the idea of an ant who runs into a stick or in the path, and then they all get stuck and they can't keep on going. And it reminded me of a scene out of the animated film Bug's Life where that actually happened. So in the edit, I took, 30 seconds or so of that clip from the movie and inserted it right after his comment, and it worked, like it was a successful thing. So those kinds of things can be done. And in that case, it worked both in audio and video. But in terms of, I made a short video clip of him talking like that, and then I threw that clip in, and it, just as a short feature of like, here's an episode and here's what's going on. I think it made it all visually very interesting and more intriguing. So these are the kinds of things that I think about, is that I don't think many podcasters are yet really going, oh yeah, there's some things for us to explore here. And certainly pop culture references like that can be done, many times over.
Yeah,
all right.
So
we're kind of at the end of our time here. So let's talk a little bit about Captivate. You were talking earlier about sort of Captivate is pushing the boundaries. Like, just talk a little bit about like, where's Captivate going these days? And, do a little plugging for if people want to, like, I'm already thinking, okay, maybe I should shift because I'm not on Captivate yet. And this sounds pretty good for me. So I'm probably going to be one of your very next customers.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, Captivate very specifically focuses on, not the new podcaster and not the existing podcaster. We don't add that demarcation. Our goal is to help the people who identify themselves as people willing to grow. And we automate the bits and help you automate the bits of podcasting that you can automate successfully to save yourself time and money. And our remit is we quite literally will only build something if it will save you time, or if it will make you money or save you money. That is it. We want to help you to market and grow your podcast. So we've got a range of things, like I said, that no one else does. Dynamic show notes builder, we've got integrated guest booking and interview management, so that the dynamic show notes builder can get your guest information for today's episode and write your show notes for you. We've got the idea research and planning. You'll be clicking around the web. I've just done it today for one of my shows, clicking around doing research for a guest. I just quickly press a button in Chrome and it adds it to a Captivate list in my episodes, and I just attach that link to the list of the episode, and it builds the show notes around that, and it makes it easy. And I've got my crib sheet for recording. Literally everything, all the dynamic content, it's all set up. Fantastic support. Brilliant culture, great community. We've got growth masterminds. We've got a lot of deep dive stuff that we do in the private community that is around teaching marketing skills and education and so on. And it just works. It's just very, very good. We don't have to have a business model that relies on always getting people through the door for free, so we can spend more time on building genuine features, because we don't have to keep filling the funnel up. We just work with the people that we want to work with, which is really nice. So yeah, it's good. We like I said, if you're a serious podcaster thinking, do you know what, this is the thing that I want to spend a bit of time on growing, then Captivate's the place for you. If you're kicking the tires and if it's something that you're like, oh, it's okay, I'll just put it on autopilot, or I'll, it's just one thing that I do out of 50, then it might not be for you. If you're serious about your audience growth, that's who we help. So we love doing it.
All right. So that can all be found at captivate.fm. Is that right?
It is. It is, Brad. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll make sure that that link is in the show notes and in all the comments where we appear on social media. And Mark, this has been great. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
It's a pleasure, Brad. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And for the rest of you folks who are still here listening, I just want to remind you that the entire archive of the Livestream Show can be found at thelivestreamshow.com. And the best way to join is to join us live every Tuesday, every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Until next Thursday, I will see you